Welcome back to the Housing Collective podcast. My name is Tom Neely, founder and director of Neymar Search, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Rachael Dennis, Chief Executive of InCommunities. So Rachael, thank you ever so much for joining us today. And for the listeners, could you give us a brief introduction to yourself and your organisation?
Sure, thanks. Hi, Tom. Well, I am Chief Executive of InCommunities, and I've been at InCommunities since 2021, early in the year. We own and manage over 22,000 homes. The majority of them are in the Bradford district, but with a few thousand or so being in Kirklees and wider West Yorkshire. So we're a place-based organisation, with increasingly wider representation and growth plans across West Yorkshire. Probably worth saying that Bradford is, one of the most diverse populations of any city in the country, with over a third of the residents coming from an Asian background. It's the youngest city in the country, with over a quarter of the population being under 20 years old. And it also has got really high levels of deprivation. So it's a really complex but exciting place to be, with exciting plans. And in communities, we play a big role in the district and the region. So, at InCommunities, we have spent the last 3.5 years or so establishing much needed foundations after the downgrade in 2020 to G2, followed by a number of control and regulatory issues that were revealed to us over the next year or so. So by necessity, we have spent the last few years being somewhat inward looking, but we just launched a 5-year strategy, really exciting time for us. And that will mean improving our services, starting to make an impact, building new homes, and, really exciting time for us. And, albeit with all the challenges you'll hear about from all the other CEOs in the sector, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Rachel. We'll definitely pick up on that 3.5-year journey that you've been on for sure. But tell us more about you. So talk to me about the journey that you've been on to becoming Chief Executive of InCommunities.
Well, I think probably every CEO you talk to will say their journey is unique and slightly different. And I'm probably the same. I started my career late in life. I had my children really early and trained to be an accountant in my 30s. So my housing career didn't start probably like everybody else's, or if there is a normal, but it started in earnest in North Devon, where I took a job as a finance analyst. So I started in finance. It was a practical choice, and then housing ended up being my calling once I was there. I've worked my way sort of up the ladder, I guess, in housing, and I've gone from sort of small organization to larger organizations. Progressed in North Devon to be director of resources, and that wider brief was really important to me when you think about ultimately getting to the role of CEO. It got me involved in all parts of the business. Then we'll probably get a bit to location, but there came a time in North Devon when I was ready to progress. The children were grown up, and so I started to look to London to opportunities, and took a job as FD in London at RHP. And so I was weekly commuting from my rural idyll to London, and eventually moving to Catalyst, where I was initially FD, and then moved on to Chief Operating Officer as well as CFO. Had a brief foray in the private sector, went to Taylor Wimpey to be Managing Director of their Southeast business based in Kent, and then realized that social housing really was my calling, and took the opportunity to come to be CEO at InCommunities. You're really lucky to have landed here, and I've now been here for 3.5 years.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And one thing that I wanted to pick up, along with actually a few things, Rachel, but the first one is the point that you made around Catalyst, because you rarely see that role change in the sector. It has started to become a bit more prevalent, but not that often, particularly when you were at Catalyst. So you moved from CFO or FD to Chief Operating Officer. So talk to me about that change, because clearly, as I say there, it rarely happens.
Yeah. I think that I'll probably start by saying that, in the finance context, I was never the old-fashioned, stereotypical bean-counting accountant. My dad, when I told him I was qualifying, said, "Oh my God, my flower child has turned into a bean counter." So I've always really been driven by people and purpose, and involved myself in the whole of the business as a finance director. So it felt natural for me to make that move. The role at Catalyst was a sort of coming together of timing and circumstances. We had a lot of change going on, and I had been heavily involved in operations for some time. we'd had a number of interim executives, and the CEO at the time felt that stability would probably be good. So I took a punt. They took a punt really on appointing me. And, it was a huge brief because I kept my CFO brief as well. So I was doing the COO role and CFO. So it was quite a leap of faith for them, I think, I've got to know probably more COOs since I took that role. And I think, gosh, they're far more knowledgeable and experienced than I was when I took on that role. But, I brought my own experience, my own perspective, my own instinct. And I think that all stood me in good stead. And I loved it. I loved the breadth. I loved working more strategically. And, with such a wide brief, I needed a good team of people around me to deliver, because otherwise, it would have just been too much. So it was a really good foundation for being CEO in a lot of ways, actually, because I had to stand back and delegate and get good people around me to do it. But I loved it.
Yeah, really interesting. I guess from your perspective, Rachel, you've experienced that in space. So what advice would you give to a senior leader who might have that opportunity to change roles?
Well, neither that role nor my role at Taylor Wimpey as managing director there, none of those weren't roles that I sought. So I never targeted doing that specific thing, but I always wanted that wider brief. So I would say if opportunities present themselves, for goodness sake, put yourself forward. And sometimes you just got to take a punt, have confidence that you can learn. I think we always look at the things that we can't do and feel, I certainly have felt quite fearful about that sometimes. But one of the things that I have realized that I always talk about is that there are different versions of good out there, so you might not have done it all before, but that doesn't mean that you won't be good or great at it.
Brilliant. And talking about the Taylor Wimpey part that you've just picked up on there, Rachel, you spent 2 years there as managing director of the Southeast region. What did you learn from those 2 years in the house building sector?
God, it was an intense couple of years. I tell you what, yeah, it isn't often that having been in housing for 20 years that you get offered roles in senior positions in PLCs. So it normally happens the other way around. So it was a great opportunity. What did I learn? I learned that there is really no mystique around house building in PLC land. Just because it's big bucks and big bonuses and big business doesn't mean it's rocket science. It doesn't mean it's not tough, and it doesn't mean it's it doesn't take a lot of work and it's not difficult. But it isn't that complicated, and you sort of feel like it's this big thing out there that's really complicated. And in fact, I think our sector is much more complex and, complicated to work through than house building in terms of the business model and the different pulls on your purpose, But my goodness, it was a huge learning curve for me. Most people in that business had been in the business since they were left school and at uni. So it was really tough to get my head around this thing that everybody knew inside and out. And also to give people confidence in me as a leader, so I needed to have that sort of, inner confidence, but humility to draw on other people in equal measure. So so I learned how to draw on that myself. I think I also definitely learned about what it really means to be commercial and how that can apply to us and our sector. When I was at Catalyst, we used to always talk about, what is commercial and how, particularly because we do a lot of market sale and the difference between that and our social pull. And, at Taylor Wimpey, with any PLC, they have that laser focus on the bottom line. And that means that in every position, even senior positions, you have to scrutinize every detail of every part of the business every day and have that focus. And, there are times when, although the business is driven to hand over good products and provide great aftercare, ultimately the bottom line has to win because that's the business model. But you go, okay, let's apply that to our sector. And if you take that concentration, that focus, and translate that to performance and services for our purpose, and you do that effectively, then that's your edge, surely, isn't it? It's harder to do in businesses with a social purpose, but I think that relentless focus is important for us to be really successful.
Yeah, I was really keen to understand kind of that 2 years there of what did you feel like that had put you in good stead to take the in-communities role?
Yeah, definitely. Getting an experience outside the sector was great, and I think it gives you another perspective. But also, I was running my own business in Taylor Wimpey. Yes, you're in PLC, but you're running your own business as well. So although in-communities was my first CEO role, I had led a business within the PLC, but also I think there's something about the fact that being able to adapt to a new business and hit the ground running, getting in that complex environment, learning something new, that can only have helped my ability to step into the role at in-communities.
Brilliant. And before we get on to in-community, I was just keen to ask you one more question on that, Rachel. I guess is just, you talk about your career. You relocated North Devon to London, then relocated London to Bradford for those roles, and particularly this recent one, London to Bradford, very different demographic to say the least, as you pointed out right at the beginning. So I guess I'm just keen to get for senior leaders, just what advice would you give to leaders considering a major relocation for their career?
Yeah, it was a big move. And in fact, even when I worked in London, we still lived in the southwest because my husband would never move to where I was working. So I have always been flexible on location because I've had that ability to weekly commute, and that worked for me and it worked for us. It's got to work for you and your family circumstances. My husband and I had a deal that I got the job and he got to choose where we lived, and they never were close enough. So I always had to weekly commute because he always wanted to live in the country. And, I thought in communities, when they approached me about the job, I thought, this is going to be a step too far. My husband said, first work out whether this is a job you want or not, and then we'll talk about location. So, maybe we can make it work. And I think that, that sort of partnership approach in our family worked for us, so we separated those two things. And, the more I learned about in-communities, the more I wanted the job, and it was right job, right time. Was it going to be the right place? And, and Ian, thought, yeah, that can work. So I guess it's, horses for horses. What worked for me doesn't necessarily work for other people who might be more firmly rooted in their place. But my goodness, that flexibility has provided masses of opportunity for me and given me an adaptability that means I can settle quite easily into new places and new things. And, if you're open to it, it also, you get to meet new people, you get to see new places and experience different locations. And that's life enhancing as well as career enhancing, so I highly recommend it, but it's got to work for you and your family and, and your lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Thank you, Rachel. And going on to in-communities, then you joined, as you say, 2021. The organisation was a G2 with quite a lot to fix, to put it politely. So can you talk to us a bit more about that journey that you've been on over the last 3.5 years?
Yeah, I mean, there's been the organizational journey and my personal journey. So, sort of hand in hand, but slightly different. It's been tough. As I said before, the organization was downgraded before I arrived, but there were a number of fundamental issues that arose quite quickly, which were obviously sort of red flags. So, we had issues around internal controls, the approach to risk management, health and safety compliance and regulatory compliance. And, of course, we discovered that we hadn't been setting rents correctly. And so as well as some of those deep-rooted issues, there were also issues about the culture of the business that needed to be surfaced carefully but visibly. And don't get me wrong, there had been intentions to address some of this stuff before, but COVID, change of leadership, that wouldn't have helped, before. So, I could take ages recounting the journey, but I suppose the things I would share are, that we had to make improvement across every single area of the business. We needed clarity of purpose, of direction. The business was crying out for that. And even if that was short term, people needed to be heard. We needed to put in place quickly a plan to listen to people and then put in place a plan to improve the culture. We needed to probe every area of compliance and control. We needed to get experienced people in to lead the business, people who'd been outside the bubble and could kind of hit the ground running, making the improvements. needed to keep the board on board. That's tough. When someone comes in and shows you the things that are wrong, it's not, it's not easy. So that was, that was a journey for us, But, we delivered a short-term plan, made fundamental improvements. Now we're poised to start making much more of an impact. And, I'm really, really pleased to say that by the time this goes out, we will have had our G1 reinstated. So it's been a long journey, really, really sort of root and branch change in the business, but, incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, no, definitely something that you should be very proud of, Rachael, as well, knowing the journey that you've been on as well. And I guess you tore through those 3.5 years on that journey. And from an organisation perspective, naturally, there has been a cultural transformation that you've been on. So with that, naturally comes a higher than average attrition rate. So how do you motivate those existing teams and the ones that clearly want to retain and foster that culture of togetherness?
Yeah, it was tough. I think you have to, think about this from the point of view of the people in the organization who are, experience what they're experiencing, hearing what they're hearing. And, and you have people who are, very worried when you arrive, people who are really up for change. And I always say that, people say they're up for change and then are always, happy to experience it, and, there were a lot of people who felt really bad about where things had got to. And I hated that for them because they didn't need to feel bad, So, we listened, carried out a massive listening exercise, acted on what we found, communicated comprehensively about what was going on, what we were doing about it. And I think people weren't really used to that level of openness, and it comes with its advantages and disadvantages, so there are some things people would rather not hear, but I think that we had to take a view that the most effective way of getting them to where we needed them to get to emotionally, to get them on board. And it was the right thing to do, was to share that with them. Otherwise, they think it's all but cloak and daggers. So devised a quick short-term plan. People had told us they didn't feel like they knew what was going on in the business. So we got a quick plan in place, and we just had to hold our nerve a bit. There's something about when things like that are happening, you so feel for the people in the organization, and you want them to have confidence in what you're doing. And you hear stories all the time, and you've got to be careful not to be distracted by the individual stories. Use them as a lever if you need to, but you've got to be able to stand back and, kind of hold your nerve, but by being honest and open and being clear about our plans, letting people know we cared about them, letting people know we cared about our customers, confidence sort of comes when people feel listened to. And so, we're still on a journey, but I think that we've created something that people want to be a part of. We definitely have attracted and retained a lot of people as a result of the change that we've had, and people are sensing we've got a real energy in the business, which is nice.
Yeah, it's great advice as well, Rachael, without a shadow of a doubt. And it's often said, and you and I have spoken about this at length offline, I mean, you're only as good as the people around you, as you said right at the beginning. So that DNA of your executive team, it was crucial, I guess. So what in your opinion works best, and what are the key traits that you look for when you were building your executive team?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, we've had this conversation, Tom, and how strongly I feel about this. Every CEO will say their exec team is amazing, but my team really is amazing. It's been a tough journey getting there. All of my exec team have been appointed in the last few years, and so I've been lucky enough to build that team from scratch. And with each appointment, I've had to work out what each service needed, what the evolving team needed, and what the people in the organization in that area, the business needed. So what traits did I look for? They needed to know their stuff. We're in an organization where people needed confidence in people's expertise. I mean, it does, go without saying people need to know their stuff, but it was really important that we had people who knew how to fix stuff, not just knew how to run a steady ship. So the experience of creating something new, and fixing things potentially, and actually, having gone through some difficult stuff. I was looking for, does this person get leadership? Do they, and, sort of everyone's got their different style, but, do they get what that is going to mean for us here? And another really important thing that I didn't know I was looking for until I stood back and looked at my team was that, I look at my team and it's very low ego. And that makes a big difference because I interviewed a lot of potential execs that brought a lot of experience and they brought good leadership, but they were so obviously in it for themselves and like the sound of their own voice or thought they knew everything. And, I didn't think of it at the time consciously. I knew that wasn't for me. That wouldn't work for me. But now I look at the team and that low ego means that we have a lot more trust and loyalty in the team than I think we would otherwise. And and then finally, I think I would have to say, in our circumstances, I would ask myself, are they going to have the resilience to stick this out? Because it was, I knew it was going to be a tough gig.
And on top of that as well, Rachel, you've clearly got a great team there that has a low ego, and you can tell straight away you've got a great culture of togetherness. But that doesn't happen overnight. So how do you work on creating that culture as an exec team? And I guess over the last 3.5 years, what lessons have you learned to try and create that?
Well, I mean, we do a lot of work together. There's one fundamental thing that we do, and we have team coaching. So every one of us has a leadership coach, and we have coaching together, and we have periodic away time. We take that time. So and a lot of our time together is about, what do people see when they look up? So we ask ourselves those questions and we take time out to work out what we need to do together. So I would, and that's always been my style and that's always been what I've done, but it has stood us in really good stead because not every leader comes from a team that has done that before. So that took a bit of adjusting, but we've all really benefited from that. And I think one of the things that, that I learned through that was, part of it is some of the traits that we know people are looking for at any given time about what people look up, what they see. But another was about our ability to be vulnerable with each other. And I have certainly had to tap into that with my team in the past year. And that has been invaluable. But also then it's also enabled us to take time out and have a laugh and have fun. And what I also realized, again, when I say that I look and I go, this is a team that's low ego, I go, every single member of this team wants to have fun and is great to be with and having a laugh. So I think that makes a big difference. And when people look up, they see people who are truly pulling together. People have confidence that we are an inspiring team. And again, it's something that people want to be a part of.
Of course, that's really useful to know. Thank you, Rachel. And you did mention there on around a personal note as well. Ian, your husband passed away this year after a long battle with glioblastoma. If you're comfortable sharing, how has that personal loss influence your perspective, I guess, on leadership, but also on life?
Yeah, definitely. And I thank you for mentioning it, Tom. He passed away in February and I'm still kind of working out what it means for me. It hasn't been that long, but it has definitely fundamentally changed my perspective in so many ways. So I do find it's important to have it out there because when you're doing the role you're doing, it can't be something that sort of people feel they need to shy away from. So thank you. So, where I am with that now is that, from a leadership perspective, I've always known intellectually that I need to stand back more and that it's important that for the organization that I remain strategic and keep that high level perspective. But now I truly feel it, I know that when Ian was ill and when he passed away, I was doing a very big job at that time, and so it's having to kind of juggle what you can think about and what you can take on was really important. So I can see that I'm better at keeping perspective. Overall, I'm more hands off, and that's partly because of the work the team did. I started, they coped. They didn't cope. They thrived and they drove the business while I was off caring for Ian because I was off for a number of months. And this was because, they're not just because they're a truly amazing bunch of people, but, my absence created a space for them to step into. And so when I came back, we had one of our away sessions with our coach and, we had serious conversations about what are the things that only I can do. And, I've had to acknowledge, I said to them, I know that there are going to be things you're going to miss about my not being here. That true empowerment is going to be something that you really value. So how can we grasp that and make the most of it? So, we know I have to delegate more, and as a result, they have to do the same. We're in the early stages of pushing that down the business, but it's a really positive lesson. Learn the hard way. It shouldn't take that kind of thing to work it out, but it's really brought to life, a lot about, true empowerment and delegation, how that can transform people and how we've seen the benefits of that. And, yeah. And I think that, yes. And I think my other point would probably be about that vulnerability, that's really been people. I now know that people would rather see my vulnerability than just see someone who thinks they have to be strong all the time. And that has helped me with the team and change my perspective on that as well. It's been hard because it's not a sort of a suit I wear comfortably.
I completely understand, and thank you for being so open and vulnerable answering that, Rachel. I mean, do you think that your values have changed somewhat over the last 6-9 months?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that palliative care experts probe into with end-of-life patients is what your values are. So they talk to patients about, trying to focus on the things that you value that can bring you happiness or joy in the time that you have left. So with however long you've got, if you live life within those values and you live those things, you can say you've lived a good life. So going through that process with Ian really made me think about what I value, and if, and how I want to look on my life as a life well lived. And you can say that you value your family and friends and the love around you, and that's exactly what I feel. But then you have to ask yourself that question about, for years, I've been a self-confessed workaholic. My life has been really committed to working long hours and prioritizing work, along with other things. But I had to ask myself, what drove that? Because, if you're going to say, you value something different or you change your focus, I knew instinctively that didn't mean that I wasn't going to work and I didn't value my work. So what was it about work that, is important to me? And I realized that there are two main things that drive my work ethic, and one is just an inbuilt, whatever I do, I want to do it well. And what I've learned since Ian's illness is that doesn't necessarily have to mean I work hard. It just needs to mean I do it well. And perhaps that's working a bit smarter and differently. And the second thing is that working for a purpose brings me happiness. So, so I know that I'm in the right place, and I know I won't make any other forays into PLC world. But that clarity really helps me because everyone was going, are you going to leave work? And I'm going, no, I love what I do, but I did have to think about what is it that I value and how do I make sure that I work in that way. And that clarity, I think, helps my team. It helps me to be more effective. And so it's got to be a positive.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really useful to know. And I guess as we look forward to the future for InCommunities, it's, as you said right at the beginning, it's an exciting new time. G1, also you've just announced your new 5-year corporate strategy, which is super exciting. I mean, but one thing I was keen to just touch on with the corporate strategy, Rachel, is it's very much centered around putting the customers at the heart of everything that you do. And you hear that a lot from chief executives, but what does that actually mean?
I think that's such a good question. And there are so many possible responses, and many of them would come from textbooks and consultants, and and there are a lot of people who really want to be cutting edge, on in customer service and customer centricity. And when we were evolving our strategy principles for our new plan, I kept saying, we don't need to find a new way of doing things. Our customers don't care whether we're doing things differently from another organization or whether we're, sort of how we compare. They just want us to be good at all the things that touch their lives, whether that's in our service or whether it's in the quality of our homes or, the community environment they live in. So I guess, for us, it was about being, I hate using the word authentic, but, sort of down to earth about it. Everything that we do, every service we provide, every improvement that we make, every investment choice that we make, we must have our customers in mind when we're doing it. And part of that's about making sure you incorporate it into sort of process and, and culture. But I think there's got to be a sort of a check all the time. So, and that I think is one of our leadership roles. We've got some really big programs of work. Again, they are change programs that are, sort of building fundamentals, some of them. But a lot of the thing about big programs are that it's, they are a, sort of start to finish process, and you can kind of get really tied into making sure that this thing follows that thing, that follows that thing, and those things happen and thinks that's success. So my view is that our leadership job is to always and continually ask questions about whether or not it's going to have the impact. Is it still going to have that impact? What difference is it going to make? Are our customers really going to experience something different? And so that's sort of, how we're approaching it anyway.
Really short. And I'm scribbling down because I just wanted to pick up on one of those points, Rachel. So you talk about always making sure that the customer's at the heart, as you say there, and always thinking about that. And as people always say, customer voice is crucial, not only from a regulatory perspective, but Absolutely. Also kind of from a day-to-day basis. But one of the key challenges when we're speaking to many people in the sector is that making sure that they are hearing from all forms of customer through their engagement. So i.e. the silent minority. So how are you addressing this challenge?
Yes, I think it's tough and it's crucial. And, I think that it's one of those things where you just can't do enough of it, although you need to make sure that you're doing something about what you do here and have the mechanisms to do that. We do all the obvious things. We have customers involved in our governance on our customer committee. We've got scrutiny panels. We've got groups that consult on specific issues. We collect data. We do surveys to triangulate that. And we use our people to triangulate what they hear. But it's not always formal either. And I think a recent example is really helpful, where we all experienced the awful riots and the Islamophobic attacks and widespread racist attacks. And we heard a lot from our more formal channels and community leaders who did not always agree on the approach that we were taking. And that's simply because it was so emotive and so contentious. And, it was really hard to know what to do. But what we did in that circumstance was to triangulate through our housing professionals, the people who are actually seeing and talking to our customers every day, to make sure that we understood their perspectives. So I think it's got to be a combination of all of those formal things, but actually standing back and go, who really knows? Who really knows what our customers want? And sometimes that's just asking a question out there in the community and using our people to do that on an informal basis. So it's got to be so sophisticated and wonderfully basic at the same time, I think.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, without a shadow of doubt. And you look, obviously we now have a new government, which the rhetoric sounds great, but obviously I'm sure there will be challenges. When you look out to the future, you've obviously just devised your 5-year strategy, so I'm sure you've thought this in depth. I mean, challenges, opportunities for the sector. What do you foresee those being, and how are InCommunities preparing for those?
Well, I think that, I think there are, as you say, masses of both. The changes in government approach and regimes has taken its toll on the sector. Our resources are more stretched than they were 5 to 10 years ago, and we're rightly balancing the need to deliver new homes with the need for spending a lot of money on reinvestment in existing homes. Absolutely rightly. Also the need to decarbonize. So masses of challenges, but we do have a government who is expressing commitment to the sector, and that is a joy to hear. That is, I think that is, very welcome for us. And if one is to assume that under the current government, we're going to get much of what we're asking for, if we get certainty on rents and there's a bit more dosh for building homes and there's some support for regeneration, that's going to go a long way to helping us deliver the new homes and much needed investment. But we're going to have to be really in a position to deliver quickly. Then there will be, there will be no excuses, and and it's not going to be an easy thing to organize ourselves and to make sure that we've got the skills that we need to deliver. That's going to be a challenge for us. On investment in existing homes, there's a lot to be done. And I think, it is a bit of about time. We're finally in a position where the world is seeing that the people who live in our existing homes deserve better places to live and to live peacefully in their communities. And, many of the people who live in them are marginalized and fearful, and some just struggling to get by. But, all of these things and people are important to us, but it's going to be difficult for us to focus on what our role is and making sure that we're clear about what our role is and not trying to solve every problem, which in turn then means that it's going to take unprecedented levels of collaboration with other services to provide the support that people will need. And, and in communities, our partnerships with the local authorities and in our region, particularly with Bradford, is really important. The partnerships with the other housing associations in the north through, when I first took on the role, I felt like, there are all these, all these partnerships. Are they really adding value? And in fact, every single one of them has a role to play in actually working together to deliver what we need to deliver. So it's gonna be tough, but it's an exciting time, and hopefully that will start to have an impact soon.
Rachel, I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. So some great nuggets of advice as well for senior leads, but also thank you for being so open and vulnerable at the same time as well. But before I do let you go, as always, we have some quick fire questions. So what has been your most valuable leadership lesson you've learned?
I think that I'd probably say that, most of my career I've had a sort of JFDI approach, focus on delivery and pace. I'd say I've learned to be careful not to fall in love with the concept and stand back. Always look at what you're doing through the lens of the people that you're serving. That's your customers and your colleagues, and making sure that what you're doing is real for them, because otherwise you're at risk of falling in love with your concept or your process.
Brilliant. And what advice would you give to an aspiring leader starting out on their journey?
I think I'd say what I said before, which is, there are different versions of great leadership. Yours won't be like anybody else's. And so don't artificially hold yourself back or be intimidated by what you think is somebody else's perfect. It isn't. Neither will yours be, but great leaders are imperfect and make mistakes, and so will you. So learn from the leaders that you admire, but have confidence in the things that are authentically you.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you believe some of the key leadership qualities that are required in today's world?
I say be clear about what you're trying to do, where you want to take people, and make sure that everything you do reinforces on focusing on that and delivering that. Make sure you listen. Jumping in is my Achilles heel, and I'm embarrassed that I have to remind myself to listen, but I think it's a massively important leadership quality. Connect with your business and your people. I think, we take pride in knowing stuff, but to be honest when you don't. And I'd have to, based on the conversation we've just had, say that, resilience is important, but it's just as important to be vulnerable.
Yeah, brilliant. And final question, Rachel, one leadership book recommendation you give to the listeners?
It would be Create Space by Derek Draper. I had the privilege of having a coaching and psychometric session with him before my appointment at Taylor Wimpey, and the book and his advice to me after that session was encourages you to sort of create this space, not only for yourself to reflect and learn, but also how you create space for the others to think and learn and solve problems for themselves. And, I keep going back to it. Like I said, listening and doing that is my Achilles heel. So I think that, coming at conversations with the answers can be the opposite of empowering. And that book is really, I think, a really good sort of handbook for listening and creating space.
Yeah, brilliant. I've not heard of that one, Rachel. So as you probably saw, I was scribbling down to get onto Amazon after this recording. So thank you for that. And thank you so much for joining us on the Housing Collective podcast, Rachel. I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, Tom. Thank you.